Hello, Alexandra here. This content is for folks interested in spiral dynamics or integral, and today's topic is the path forward. And I'm talking about a how-to in order to progress through the stages. Specifically, this will be really useful for green progressing to teal, progressing to turquoise. And I touched on this topic in a previous video, but I really want to go into it in depth today. So the commonalities between green and also teal and turquoise, getting into early turquoise, is that the path is relatively the same. So as I mentioned in my previous video, I believe it was Terry O'Fallon who talked about the trifecta, not just the spiritual element or the meditation or the spiritual discussions, but also number 2, parts work or working on ourselves or integrating our parts, and number 3, using the map of the stages as an actual tool for helping ourselves expand our context, take a look at where we're at, take a look at some of the pitfalls of where we're at stage-wise, and to be able to see where we're going and recognize it as we're getting there. And I mentioned that Kim Barta talked about parts work or working at ourselves at stage green is sort of like opening the living room and letting the parts in and just being present with the parts. And I know that for me at stage green, I didn't have really specific parts. I might have had like an inner child here or an inner child there, and the parts weren't hyper organized, but I was inviting my feelings in and parts in, and kind of in the early stages actually doing some heavy lifting, simultaneously enjoying inner work as stage green so often does, even though the work might be difficult. But I am going to even use this metaphor. I would even say my wonderful parts kind of entering a living room, if they were a team, a sports team, they would have been sort of like the Bad News Bears. Like early on, when the Bad News Bears weren't very good, they were a little clumsy. They had a juvenile delinquent. They had a coach with a lot of personal problems. And you just love these parts. We're discovering, maybe for the first time, if we haven't ever really worked on ourselves before, these parts, they might be hurt parts. They might be parts that have anxiety. They might be parts where we don't totally believe in our complexities and capacities, and we're just doing the beginnings of integration. And you know, I have said this in a couple of videos before, is that years ago I did ask a counselor if everyone has quote-unquote post-traumatic stress, and she said yes, everyone has at least mild post-traumatic stress. And I'll give the examples again. If our parents get divorced in childhood, or if we change schools and lose our friends in childhood. So I would challenge anyone that says they don't have parts that need integration. And perhaps my Bad News Bears analogy was a little bit dramatic, but I'm just saying I was doing the inner work, but all these parts were not really working together as a well-oiled machine, a pro league team, as they started to do in stage teal. Stage teal is really different than stage green as far as the inner landscape and how organized the psyche is and how organized the inner landscape is. And Kim Barta mentioned that when we get to stage teal, these parts have been integrated and the positive sides of the parts are now integrated. So they're sitting around a table like a committee, and they're all working together in synergy. And combined with the spiritual practice and combined with reading about the stages, this synergy makes teal an incredibly effective stage. And I say this all the time in all of my videos, and I'll say it again because it's so worth mentioning, and it's true. Teal, or yellow in spiral dynamics, at least the book Spiral Dynamics by Don Beck and Christopher Cohen says, is more effective than all the previous stages combined. This just means that this stage just has more breadth, more depth, more complexities, more capacities. You could serve the world better. If you had some stress or challenges in your emotional life, it gets easier. We're more aware, we're more integrated, we have more insight, our capabilities are more broadened and deepened, and we can be of more use to society. So, and then of course, the next stage, going into early turquoise, these parts begin to all speak together but without words. It's a lot of synergy, and that's why we're getting the quiet mind. And there's a caveat to that. Right before late yellow or early turquoise, as we begin to go into the no self and feel a more deep sense of well-being, some of the parts, the remaining parts, I'll say it my way, try to take over. And hello, stage transitions can be hard, and I can confirm this is very real. So, sometimes I feel like when I started to read about turquoise, like there was some mystique to it. Not the early turquoise. We are in the same place green is, and the same place teal is, and we're all doing the work. We're chopping wood, we're carrying water, we're participating maybe in integral groups and the discussions, the spiritual discussions. We're working the parts. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult, or parts are a little bit sticky, and benefiting from the rich and profound depth and wisdom and context of reading about stages and watching videos online. And the reason I'm talking about this is, without this trifecta of inner work, green can circle around and stay at green. And the discussions in integral groups, if they're a majority of green, can stay at green. They can max out at green. And green has a certain amount of depth and complexity, but as we go into teal and turquoise, that depth expands, the insight expands, the context expands significantly and noticeably, and that context can be missed in a group of green folks who aren't also reading about the stages and doing their parts work. And for folks who are in a mostly green group in integral, there's a lot of green folks in integral. If they're articulate, if they're quick to encapsulate, and they're at teal or they're at turquoise, they may really enjoy the conversations, and they may love to express themselves by adding context. But as I mentioned in the last video, if they're long talkers like me, sometimes I have a hard time getting out the context, because we also might be thinking 5 or 6 things at once, or even have 10 or 12 bullet points around the context, and it takes a lot of verbal dexterity to pull out just one or two quick bullet points to add to the context. So in a lot of ways, if green isn't doing the work, doing the trifecta, green is limiting itself. The discussions can be more horizontally focused rather than leading to integration and vertical growth. And green can stay at green unless it follows. This is one path, and because Terry O'Fallon mentioned it, I think it probably is a highly, highly, highly effective path. That's the path I used. That's the path a lot of folks in integral use, and you'll hear some videos at Integral Life talk about internal family systems. So what I'm talking about is a generally well-used path, generally tried and true. I don't want to say it's true for everybody. I do believe there's a small percentage of people who just somehow flow through the stages. You know, I don't think most of us do. I think a lot of us do the work, need to do the work, and be a little bit deliberate about how we move forward. And so these are just a couple of quick thoughts, and we want to remember that integral means stage teal and stage turquoise, and it is full of stage green folks, many of them probably on the brink of going into stage teal. As Ken Wilber has said, in the next 10 years, maybe 10 to 15% of the population will be at stage teal. We're already heading there, and if somebody's maxing out green and they don't have the tools, like there are a lot of green folks I've noticed in the integral groups maybe haven't even watched the videos. Nomali Pereira has great videos. I would even start there. You can watch anything or read anything by Ken Wilber, Suzanne Cook-Reuter. So if we circle around at green, we're sort of limiting the synergy of the larger group or the larger integral community. And I know Greens don't want to do that. Greens want to serve, and it can be kind of hard. I think if I were at stage green and I heard this, I would have jumped all over it, and thinking, please give me the tools, because I had a very hard time at stage green. I was wet behind the ears when I entered. I was 30. I didn't have the map of the stages to use. I was in the shadow of green. I had some codependence. I had sort of like, I was going sort of out of my body and all these spiritual experiences, and I didn't understand why all of a sudden I was so different than my family and my peers. I did have, luckily, a couple of green friends, and at a New Age bookstore I was able to do readings and test out my intuition, explore some of the spiritual stuff, but man, I was not grounded. And I kind of wonder if it's weird to have someone who's been through green kind of reach back and say, hey, greens, look over here, you can do this, this, and this. And it's not meant in a hierarchical way, because in some of the discussion groups I'm in, some of the folks at Stage Green are brilliant. So it's meant in a way of opportunity, of just giving someone something to hold on to, a tool, a path forward, and allowing someone to take the ball and run with it. Allowing someone to heighten their complexities, heighten their capacities, heighten their insight, resolve maybe if they're going, number one, if they have some emotional stuff or emotional issues, or they've been through something hard, and number two, if they're wobbling in between stage green and stage teal and don't know, why am I wobbling? That is the gift of knowing you're in a transition, when things don't quite feel right and things seem kind of off, and you might be not depressed but like slightly dysthymic, or things are just, you feel kind of, you don't quite know, and you maybe feel like you're in a liminal space. This is a fantastic time. If you have not read about the stages or watched the videos on the stages, or if you've not tried out Parts work, a fantastic time to grab onto that and provide us with a path forward out of this liminal space. So I hope you find this information useful. Sending you love and blessings, and see you in the next video.